Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Today I have the opportunity to work on a reel that Bobby from Tennessee sent in. This is a Berkley 105. It's a traditional bait casting reel, probably the late 50s, early 60s. And he says it needs servicing, and I would agree with that it needs servicing. Very hard to turn. Takes me kind of full pressure here. It's almost impossible to turn as if you were reeling in a fish. Well, there's multiple causes for that, but almost always with a reel of this type, the cause is dried grease that's binding the whole thing up. Well, to start with, Berkley was not a reel manufacturer. Berkley is known for its baits. Today it's known for its power baits, soft baits and the like. It was known for hard baits as well. And they contracted with various manufacturers to make the reels as a complement to their baits, right? So if you're going to send terminal tackle and sell that kind of stuff, having a reel along with that is a nice addition to your product line without you spending the time on infrastructure to do that. So there's a whole group of contract manufacturers out there that do that, and Berkley utilized one of them. I was searching for a country, made in Japan or made in USA or whatever, to kind of help me a little bit further along with this. Didn't find it, and that might be a little bit of an indication that perhaps this was made in the US, maybe even made by somebody like Shakespeare, who made reels for South Bend and others. So regardless of who made it, we'll show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to keep it going again. If you like these kinds of videos, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my channel. If you do subscribe to my channel, I want to ask you to use that notification button. That'll tell you when I'm posting videos, and it'll give you a good width and breadth of the types of videos that I post. Today we're on a vintage bait casting reel. Tomorrow it might be the most current saltwater reel. Maybe we'll do a low profile reel like this Lose reel. Never know what shows up in my shop, and that's kind of what become the subjects of my videos. It's the ones that people send in for service and repair or drop off. And well, that's kind of an eclectic mix, but it's kind of fun too to see all the different types of reels. So if you like them, subscribe. If you subscribe, please use the notification. We're going to start by taking off the handle. There's a handle nut on there. I'm going to use a nut driver, and we'll take it off with that. This one says it's a 9/32. It may be a metric, I'm not sure. Probably this reel was made in the US with that the US thread. Somebody, I don't believe this was part of the original piece, but there's a tension ring underneath that nut cap. If there was, so be it. Notice that there is no free spool release on this. That means this is a traditional knuckle buster. When you cast it, it's simply going to release the spool backwards. When you reel, it'll bring it in forward. When I service these reels, the first thing I generally like to do is just release the pawl and clean that one up before we go too far. That pawl is held in place by a little cover, and that cover is held in there by a screw. So let's do that one first before we get into the mechanics. There's a screw here that we're going to remove. Be careful with these old reels. These old reels, particularly something like this, are almost impossible to find parts for. So take your time, and if something feels like it's breaking, just be very careful with it, because you won't find the replacement. All right, that little cap came off. Now we can remove the pawl. To do that, I'm going to use a micro pliers to pull it out. And this is your pawl. It's got 2 points on it, and it's got a shoulder. This one's very clean. I don't see any evidence whatsoever of dirt or the like. So what I want to do is I want to just take a little bit of oil, put that in. I'm going to oil the gear, worm gear as well. This is a relatively clean reel, but I suspect what we will find is that it's all dried grease inside that's probably causing the issue here. All right, put that back in. And I left these on my table because we're going right back to just installing this and getting those parts out of the way. One of the things I recommend that you do as you service your reels is to take pictures of the pieces before you take them off. It's a good practice, and it will show you where your pieces go if you get distracted, or if you trust your memory and for some reason the memory just doesn't return the favor. Alright, so we've just serviced the pawl and we've oiled the worm gear. I oil that worm gear, I don't grease them. And then we have 3 side plate screws. This one's just a cavity that's the end of the line worm, so you don't need to remove that if it's even possible to remove that. And you may need a micro driver for this. It seems like this screwdriver that I have just fits. And always try to match the screw tip to the slot. If you go with something too small, you have a chance to butterfly that. If you butterfly it, it's going to be very difficult to grip it to reinstall it in the future. Alright, there's one more here, and that should remove the side plate. And I suspect what we'll find is a lot of old grease in here that's bogging this reel down. I'm going to take those 3 pieces and put them into a parts tray. This round I'm using a fast food container to hold them. And if you put them into one place like a parts tray, you will almost guarantee yourself that you will find them when it's time to reinstall. With those 3 off, we should be able to remove this now. We can. There's your drive. There's a spool. And here's your drive for your worm gear. And then this is a hard piece of plastic which should also come out so that we can clean underneath. There we go. There's some old grease on there. I wanted to make sure that we got that out before we went much further. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to use penetrating oil as a general degreaser. And in this case, I think we can wipe that clean with a paper towel. And I always recommend that when you do this, just go with the least abrasive way to clean the reel. I mean, if you need something more, go to a kitchen scrubby. If you need something more than that, go to a piece of steel wool. But if you can clean it up with something that has no abrasion or limited abrasion, then I think that's the best way to go. So for example, I have a little kitchen scrubby that I use here. I put some rod and reel cleaner on it, and that will remove any tarnish that's kind of on there and is harder to get than just a paper towel. And again, on a plastic reel piece like this, especially one that's this old, that has the weathering going on with that, you want to just be very careful as you work with that not to break it. There's a cup on the back end of this that accepts the back end of the spool. I'm going to put a little bit of grease in that cup. That's all you need to do there. That will accept the back end of the spool here. And the spool is clean. If you want to take a moment to buff it up, use that scrubby pad and a rod and reel cleaner, and it should restore any luster to it. And while you have the reel open, it's a good time to get to the back end of this, the reel seat, the bottom posts, the inside of the posts, and that, to give it a cleaning as well. Doesn't take much on this one. And again, we've just taken apart and lubed. You can turn your worm gear now. You see it turns nice and easily. So we're in good condition with that one. That's not bogging the reel down. So what we're going to assume then is that the reel is bogging down because of dried grease, and the dried grease being in the main gear itself. Let's go ahead and put this back on. Get a nice snap. Make sure that the ring is seated all the way around that inner frame there. I'm just going to lay that down for a moment. We can take the spool. This is the back end of the spool. It's going to go in that little cup on the non-gear side. We can put that in now. I just noticed we have a little bit of dirt here, so I'm going to clean that out. And I've also pushed that worm gear out, which is okay. I'm going to keep that worm gear out for a second and put a little bit of grease onto the tip where that worm gear is going to go into the cap that's holding the other side. And I do notice that even though I cleaned most of it, there's a little bit of dirt there as well, so we'll take care of that while we're at it. You want to rotate that. You want to make sure that your line guide goes into the slot and that you're into the cap on this side slot and into the cup over here. That's okay now. Let's take this spool with that little bit of grease on it, put that back in. And we can set this whole piece off to the side there. Well, there's not much on this reel. It is a direct drive reel. This is your cup for your worm gear. The rest of it is just a blank side here. So if there's any, oh yeah, look at this. It's so hard to turn right here. Well, if that's hard to turn, that says that we're all greased up inside, and that's what's causing the poor performance here. Push that out. Kind of work it away. And then what we're going to do is just do our best to clean this up. Again, I'm going to use the penetrating oil as a degreaser. Let's get a good amount of that on. I put my finger on the bottom of that cup so that the penetrating oil can sit there for a moment. Then we'll bring it through, and you can see the dissolved grease on there. That's a good reason for this to be a problem. We can also see that there's a whole bunch of grease and the like on the side cap here. Now let's take your time, clean it up, get that old grease off of there, because that's the cause of this bogging down. So if you have any questions on this reel or any reel in particular, if you'd like to learn a little bit more about it, maybe the history of Berkley, maybe just knucklebuster old style bait casters to begin with, or anything else for that matter, leave that in the comments section. I will try to answer those questions for you. And generally, I try to answer those questions in the morning. Well, I'm looking at the shaft on this, and it doesn't appear that the shaft has a lot of old grease and the like on there, but sometimes it's not that easily visible, so do the same thing here. Coat the shaft with some penetrating oil or other degreaser, wipe it down, and then feel it. Make sure that there's nothing that's really stuck on there or greased up or the like. Check the teeth on the main gear. Those are all in good condition. And we can go ahead and take the grease, get a good amount of grease onto the teeth. So what's happened here is this reel probably has not been used in a while. The grease gets spun off the main gear, lodges behind it like on that surface there, and just dries in place like a glue. So you just periodically, you need to service these reels, make sure that they are well lubricated and kept grease free. To install now, we just put that back into the piece, and that should turn a whole lot freer. Yeah, now it just spins like a top, right? So that's what was causing the issue with the performance right there. Let's take a moment to put a little bit of grease into the cup where the line guide and the cup where the spool are going to seat. And then what I like to do with this is I like to put the handle back on. The handle is going to prevent that from falling out during the reinstall. Again, I don't know if this little piece belongs on there or not. My intuition says it does not, but somebody put it on there as an anti-vibration piece to kind of hold that handle firm, so we'll go with that for now. Tighten that up, and then crank your handle to make sure that, look at this. Before I couldn't turn it with 2 fingers, now it spins nice and easy. So there you go. That's the issue that we had to solve. While I have that off, I have some of the old grease and WD-40 on there. Let's clean that up. There's a part of the spool that acts as the pinion gear. That doesn't come off. It's on an integral part of the spool, so make sure you get grease on that. Also make sure you get grease onto the gear that drives the worm gear. We should just be able to bring this in now. Remember that kind of Berkley was facing up. Align your screw holes as you go ahead to try and mesh the gears. And then just center those screws. We're not lined in here. So just take your time. Sometimes you may have to turn the handle to get that seated properly. And it'll pull in when you've got it right. Okay, we're in right. We've got those 3 small screws. And we'll see if I have to use a screw starter. This one has a little bit of an indent. I may actually be able to get these started without it. But if I don't, we'll go back to the starter. Here's one in. And you need to keep the tension on the side plate while you're doing this. That way the pieces don't fall out as you go to install the others. Here's the second one. There's one more. It's a nice little reel. It's not complicated. Probably didn't sell much for much in the day. But again, Berkley was just buying the pieces or buying the manufacturer of it as a complement to their line. So they were just trying to, probably selling them in rod and reel combinations, probably making more money off their lures and their baits than they were off of the reel itself. That's a beautiful looking reel, that's for sure. Again, I wish I knew a little bit more about the history. So what have we done so far? We've taken out the pawl, we've cleaned that up, we've oiled the pawl and the worm gear, cleaned the insides with some rod and reel cleaner, taken out the main gear. We found that's where the hang-up was. Greased that all up after cleaning it, and let's see how we did. Well, it's a little tight to reel. That means we need to adjust the cap on this side to loosen it up a little bit. There you go. Now we're back to running. If you want to loosen it up a little bit more, the thing will fly. So there's your answer. That's what the issue was. Bad grease. And now we've got a functional reel that's ready to go fishing. Again, there is no free spool release, so when you're casting, the line is going to let out. This is going to back off. It's going to come in a backward manner. And that's called a knuckle buster, because if you're casting a reel like this and you're not paying attention, it's going to whack you in the knuckles. So there you go. The Berkley 105 traditional bait casting fishing reel. I hope you've enjoyed the video. To everyone who's a first responder and essential personnel, thank you for all it is that you do to keep us safe. To everyone, please stay safe, stay well, and stay fishing. Keep those reels maintained, but more importantly, get them out there on the water, get the line wet, let them do what they're supposed to do. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Have a great day.